Hollywood's golden age wasn't just glitz and glamour. It was a battleground where big ideas collided with even bigger taboos. Science fiction didn't just predict the future, it poked at the anxieties, prejudices, and power struggles of its own era, often kicking up storms of outrage that the studios never saw coming. So what happens when bold visions and forbidden questions explode on screen? Buckle up, because these 15 movies didn't just entertain, they started fights, broke rules, and in some cases, changed everything. Ready to see just how wild sci-fi could get when nobody was playing it safe? Things to Come, 1936. Imagine making a film so prophetic, so uncomfortably close to the world's deepest fears that censors force you to change it before anyone even sees it. Welcome to Things to Come, the H.G. Wells epic that made the future look less like an adventure and more like a nightmare. Set in a world ravaged by endless war and plague, the movie's depiction of civilization collapsing and rising again under authoritarian rule was a gut punch to 1930s audiences. British authorities demanded edits, fearing its anti-war stance might stir up unrest. Meanwhile, the movie's prediction of aerial bombing raids hit too close for comfort as Europe teetered on the edge of World War II. The film was controversial, not just for what it showed, but for the questions it raised. Are we doomed to repeat history? Can technology save us, or only make things worse? Things to Come didn't just get under people's skin. It set the tone for an entire generation of science fiction, one where the greatest threat wasn't aliens, but ourselves. The Invisible Man, 1933. How do you censor something you can't see? That was the challenge with The Invisible Man, a film that combined black comedy, cutting-edge effects, and gleeful nihilism in ways nobody expected. Claude Rains' mad scientist isn't just a threat to his enemies, he's a menace to the very idea of decency. The violence is shocking, the humor is pitch black, and the film's willingness to let its villain run wild rattled censors across America and Europe. Some cities banned it outright, while others demanded entire scenes be scrapped for being too disturbing. Critics argued the movie blurred the line between entertainment and madness, but audiences were hooked. The Invisible Man proved that sometimes what you can't see is what scares you most. And as far as controversy goes, it's a reminder that science fiction doesn't need rubber monsters or spaceships to make people squirm. It just needs the nerve to ask what happens when science and sanity part ways. Flash Gordon serial, 1936-1940. If you think superhero outrage started with modern blockbusters, think again. Flash Gordon was riling up censors before color film was even a thing. These action-packed serials, starring Buster Crabbe in skin-tight spandex, were the space opera answer to Saturday morning cartoons, except parents, preachers, and politicians saw them as the end of civilization as we know it. Religious leaders protested the show's pagan values, and melodramatic villain Ming the Merciless, whose obvious yellow peril caricature triggered a wave of protests and accusations of racism. Parent groups demanded bans, claiming Flash Gordon's interplanetary escapades promoted violence and unchristian behavior. Meanwhile, some censors were more worried about the revealing costumes and what they might be teaching to impressionable kids. The debate got so heated, some theaters refused to show episodes, and entire regions considered the serials too dangerous for respectable audiences. Yet Flash Gordon only grew in popularity, paving the way for the campy and rebellious tone of future sci-fi. It's a reminder that behind every cult classic, there's a moral panic lurking in the background, ready to prove that nothing gets people talking or yelling like a hero with a ray gun and a buckled belt. Just imagine 1930. Who knew a sci-fi musical could stir up this much trouble? Just Imagine landed in theaters promising a whimsical vision of the year 1980, but what audiences got was an unsettling cocktail of eugenics, arranged marriages, and government-mandated everything. The film's progressive future is built on forced conformity and technocratic control, with characters assigned names like J21 and Z4, because apparently creativity was banned along with personal choice. Intended as a comedy, the movie instead unnerved critics and viewers alike, with some accusing it of sneaking fascist and totalitarian ideas under the guise of singing and dancing. The scientific social order, where babies are produced in labs and marriage is decided by state ballots, was meant as satire, but hit a little too close to home for comfort in a world still grappling with real-world eugenics debates. Reviews were polarized. Some called it brilliant, while others dubbed it the creepiest musical ever made. If you ever wanted proof that good intentions can cause a firestorm, Just Imagine is a case study in how even the most toe-tapping future can become a controversial minefield. The Shape of Things to Come, 1936. If you thought utopias were safe territory, think again. The Shape of Things to Come, based on H.G. Wells's vision of a world rescued by science and led by a benevolent elite, set off alarms everywhere. The film painted a future where war is abolished, but only after a group of technocrats seizes control and runs the planet like a global think tank. Some critics blasted the movie as thinly veiled socialist propaganda, while others feared it was promoting totalitarianism in a shiny, sanitized wrapper. With its scenes of world government, population management, and scientific dictatorship, the film quickly became a lightning rod for political debate. Audiences in the 1930s, living in a world teetering between fascism and communism, saw too many echoes of real-world power struggles. Even Wells's own supporters argued over whether the movie was a warning or an endorsement of utopian overreach. In the end, The Shape of Things to Come proved that when science fiction tries to imagine a perfect world, the fight over who gets to define perfect is just getting started. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1931. Not every controversy needs ray guns and rocket ships. Sometimes, all it takes is one man's split personality and a willingness to push boundaries. Ruben Mamoulian's adaptation of Stevenson's classic shocked audiences with its bold visual transformations and raw exploration of human depravity. Frederick March's performance as both the tortured Dr. Jekyll and the animalistic Mr. Hyde set a new bar for on-screen duality, but the film's frank portrayal of violence, addiction, and sexuality was what really set censors on edge. Religious groups and moral crusaders called it an assault on decency and Christian values. The film's special effects, then cutting edge, only added fuel to the fire, making Hyde's transformation disturbingly real for viewers unaccustomed to such cinematic sorcery. In some cities, the movie was cut to ribbons or banned outright. The message? Exploring the dark side of human nature might sell tickets, but it will always get you into trouble with the guardians of good taste. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde didn't just stir up controversy, it redefined how far Hollywood could go in bringing nightmares to life. The Man They Could Not Hang, 1939. If Boris Karloff is in the cast, controversy is usually close behind. In The Man They Could Not Hang, he plays a scientist executed for conducting deadly suspended animation experiments, only to come back from the dead thanks to his own invention. Sound a little sacrilegious? That's exactly what censors thought. The film's execution scenes were so intense that they prompted accusations of exploiting capital punishment for thrills. But it's the resurrection plot that really set off alarm bells. Religious leaders accused the movie of promoting godless science and mocking the very idea of the soul. Karloff's chilling performance as the wronged, vengeful genius blurred the line between tragic victim and mad scientist, leaving viewers with uncomfortable questions about the price of progress. Some critics called it scientific blasphemy, and public debate raged over whether Hollywood was glorifying men who play God. The controversy didn't hurt box office returns, but it did cement the film's place as a case study in just how quickly science fiction can turn into a battleground for deeper cultural anxieties. The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. If you want to see a movie that turned Cold War paranoia into a box office hit, look no further than The Day the Earth Stood Still. When Klaatu and his robot Gort land in Washington, D.C. with a simple message, "Stop your violence or else," audiences didn't know whether to cheer, panic, or call the FBI. The film's plea for global peace and nuclear disarmament hit a raw nerve in a world still reeling from Hiroshima and on the brink of the Red Scare. Some saw it as thinly disguised communist propaganda, with government censors keeping a watchful eye on screenings and newspaper columnists warning of subversive Hollywood messages. Meanwhile, religious leaders balked at Klaatu's Christ-like imagery, especially the resurrection scene and his gospel of forgiveness. The movie's controversy only boosted its profile, cementing its place as a sci-fi classic that dared to use aliens not just as invaders, but as cosmic mediators. For a film that asked humanity to live together or die alone, it definitely proved that nothing gets people arguing like a Martian ultimatum delivered on the White House lawn. Forbidden Planet 1956. Think the 1950s were all clean-cut and wholesome? Forbidden Planet came along and blew that illusion to bits with an interstellar Freudian freakout. Taking Shakespeare's The Tempest to the stars, this film was packed with innovations, electronic music, lavish sets, and a legendarily short-skirted Anne Francis as Altera. But what really caused Jaws to drop was its open discussion of the monster from the id, a psychic force born of sexual repression and subconscious desire. Critics raged over its adult themes, and moral watchdogs feared the movie would corrupt America's youth with its hints of forbidden lust and unchecked science. The famous Robbie the Robot became a pop culture icon, but church groups and some school boards weren't impressed, with calls for bans in conservative regions. Ironically, all the outrage just guaranteed packed theaters. Forbidden Planet didn't just challenge the limits of special effects, it forced audiences to face the monsters lurking inside themselves, and that's always a recipe for controversy. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956. Is there anything scarier than your neighbors turning into emotionless copies? Invasion of the Body Snatchers brought Cold War terror home, making ordinary life feel sinister. Depending on who you asked, it was either a warning about communist infiltration or a swipe at American conformity. Either way, it was a political powder keg. Critics and politicians debated the film's meaning endlessly, and some small-town theaters banned it outright, fearing it would incite paranoia. The film's eerie tone, with people being replaced by alien pod people, captured a national mood of suspicion and anxiety. Director Don Siegel played coy about the film's real message, but that only made the arguments louder. The ending, abrupt, unresolved, and deeply unsettling, left viewers rattled and eager to debate what it all meant. Invasion of the Body Snatchers proved that sci-fi could scare you without a single laser gun, just by showing you the face of your best friend and daring you to wonder, is anyone really who they say they are? The Fly 1958. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Those words didn't just apply to David Hedison's slow-motion transformation into a human-insect hybrid. They also summed up how censors and parents felt about this gory, tragic twist on mad science. The Fly took body horror mainstream, forcing audiences to confront what happens when human ambition goes too far. The visual effects, half-man, half-giant fly, were enough to give anyone nightmares. But the story's real sting was its message. You can't always control the monsters you create. Critics called the film repulsive, and some theaters refused to screen it for fear of traumatizing kids. Church groups condemned its sick imagination, and the final scene, with the tiny fly pleading, "Help me," in a spider's web, was considered so disturbing it almost got cut. Yet the controversy only made the film a box office smash. The Fly was a perfect storm of shock, schlock, and smart commentary about the dangers of playing God, a combination that always gets people talking and sometimes running for the exits. The creation of the Humanoids, 1962. Some movies are controversial for their gore, others for their ideas. The creation of the Humanoids falls firmly in the latter camp, a slow-burning cerebral film that imagined a future where robots are so advanced, nobody's quite sure who's really human anymore. Released at the height of civil rights unrest and Cold War anxiety, The film's story of robot persecution and questions about identity and equality hit uncomfortably close to home. Censors balked at its frank discussions of genocide, prejudice, and the soul, while critics didn't know what to make of its downbeat, talk-heavy narrative. The movie became a cult sensation among sci-fi fans and intellectuals, with its bleak, philosophical tone sparking heated debates in college dorms and late-night television slots. If you want a sci-fi film that makes you think and maybe squirm, this is it. The creation of the Humanoids is proof that sometimes the most subversive thing a movie can do is ask, "What makes us human?" and refuse to give an easy answer. Metropolis. Let's get this out of the way. Metropolis isn't just a movie, it's a cultural earthquake that still shakes the foundations nearly a century later. Fritz Lang's dystopian masterpiece is the blueprint for every robot uprising, class struggle, and apocalyptic city you've ever seen on screen. But when it premiered, Metropolis wasn't celebrated, it was feared. Governments and censors saw its images of worker rebellions and its sinister, seductive robot Maria as threats to the very fabric of society. In Germany, critics attacked it as communist propaganda. In America, studios chopped out entire reels to tone down its political bite. And don't even get started on the religious backlash. Some called it blasphemous for its wild biblical allusions. For decades, different versions circulated, with some scenes literally lost in vaults. But here's the thing. The more people tried to silence Metropolis, the bigger its legend became. The robot Maria became a sci-fi icon, and the film's vision of a world run by cold, unfeeling technology felt more prophetic every year. Metropolis didn't just provoke controversy, it thrived on it, blazing a trail for every future filmmaker bold enough to put big ideas ahead of box office comfort. Frankenstein. If you think Hollywood horror is scary now, imagine what it was like when Boris Karloff first lurched onto the screen as Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein wasn't just a monster movie, it was a slap in the face to polite society. The idea of man playing God, of bringing the dead back to life, made religious leaders absolutely lose their minds. Cities banned it, censors demanded scenes be cut, including the infamous little girl by the lake, and the phrase, "It's alive," became a nationwide panic button. People reportedly fainted in theaters, while some critics insisted the film was so disturbing it could corrupt public morals. Even the studio got cold feet, slapping a warning on the opening credits. But here's the kicker. All that outrage turned Frankenstein into a sensation. It raised questions nobody was ready to answer about science, ethics, and what makes us human. It also gave Hollywood its first taste of the power and the peril of pushing boundaries. The monster may have been stitched together from spare parts, but the controversy was pure, undiluted dynamite. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. Step right up for the freak show that Hollywood almost buried. Island of Lost Souls took H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau and dialed the madness up to 11. Charles Laughton's diabolical Moreau is bad enough, but the real trouble started with his grotesque half-human, half-animal creations. Audiences were horrified, not just at the makeup effects, but at the film's raw, sadistic energy. Religious groups called it an abomination, censors hacked it to pieces, and the UK straight-up banned it for over 20 years, labeling it against nature. American censors didn't fare much better, forcing drastic cuts that turned the story into a jagged fever dream. Critics called it perverse and inhuman, but fans and future filmmakers couldn't look away. Island of Lost Souls is a pure distillation of pre-code Hollywood's willingness to stare into the abyss and then film whatever looked back. Its cult reputation only grew as it became the movie that was too shocking for its own time. And honestly, isn't that what science fiction is all about? So, after all these mind-bending, line-crossing, and censorship-defying movies, what's your verdict? Did Hollywood's golden age sci-fi go too far or not far enough? Drop your hottest take in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button if you crave stories that challenge the rules, and share this video with someone who thinks old movies never pushed boundaries. Because in the end, the real sci-fi revolution wasn't just on screen, it was in the debates these films started. Which controversy still gets under your skin?